Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today is November 21, 2025. Want to thank Rob Grant, his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Please subscribe. I also want to welcome today's guest, Radames Pera. Is that it, Radames?
Yes, Radames Pera. That's right.
Pera. Where are you calling from?
From France.
How cool is that? The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
What is the best thing for a human being? The best thing. Well, life is the best thing, and becoming aware of one's place in it is the second best thing.
Wow, no one's ever done. Here's the second best. I love both. The first one I love because Louis Buñuel said, long live the living. So life is the best thing. Very good. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Oh, gosh, I'm so grateful for these questions. I don't get to answer things like this very often, so I'm grateful. Direct observation, process through what I've learned.
Yeah. Very good. Direct observations. So that makes it a proactive thing. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
To understand their place in the world.
Yeah. Is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented?
It's intrinsic to being human.
Yeah. Do thoughts create emotions?
Thoughts are one of the components of emotion.
Yeah.
Because there's also reactivity. There's something that goes beyond thought, which has to do with previous experience. There's predisposition, genetic, and then there's early conditioning, i.e. trauma and/or skill in responding to thoughts that arise naturally within us. And then emotion is a reaction oftentimes to those things and external input, of course.
Really good. You're concise and articulate. I appreciate this. Now, this one's a fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
take a moment to observe what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Can humans think without language?
Absolutely. Thinking is not language based. Thinking is based on our brain and our connection to the world, whether consciously or unconsciously. And a thought arises from the interaction between the physical world and the interior world, which are both the same, but they are both different perspectives that meet inside our physical and mental, construction. I mean, the environment and our perception of the environment is what create. Well, the processing of that creates our what we believe as our existence.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, what you're doing is touching on a lot of the subjects we're going into. So it's really
you're touching on them. I'm just responding to your great questions.
Well, thank you. But the Chomsky says language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Chomsky is such a great thinker, man. We're so fortunate to have somebody like that in the world.
Yeah.
And he's still with us. What do I do? I'm not on the level of Chomsky, I'll tell you that much. what I do, and sorry for the background noises. That's my faulty chair making those clicking noises. Well, listen, I lived a portion of my life reactively, and I have learned in my later years. I'm 65 now. I've learned to. I've tried to train myself to pause and not react instantly and impulsively like I used to. I try to pause, as I've done in this interview so far, and really uh, contemplate for a moment or two before responding. And that's been a lifelong training to get to that point. I'm not sure if that answers your question, though.
No, it does. Because people think when I ask a question, they have to answer it immediately. And I had this guy last week, and he would just think, and it would be like a long 20 or 30 seconds of silence. And I put it on my interview suggestions to everyone, silence is okay. But it is sort of creepy because people like, did your sound just go out? They think,
Right.
and it is like, it's hard for us to deal with contemplating, having time to contemplate, and like some of these words, direct observation, and not being too impulsive. But your observations of humans in general, are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
I choose to not try to parse that out so
Yeah,
specifically because I think that we are all at various times various combinations of the two, and
yeah,
not in any sort of linear or consistent way necessarily, depending on circumstance, depending on our predisposition at the moment, depending on what we ate for breakfast, those things, how we slept or didn't sleep. Those are all factors that affect how those two different aspects of how we relate to life. So I can't answer that any more than that.
no, you did well. And just a couple things. Just, Rebecca Solnit says it so well. Just because you ask me a question doesn't mean I have to answer it. I'm not. I'm just asked. These are just prompts for us to talk, and so you don't have to answer the question, and you can say I don't know or I can't answer it.
Oh,
And
I'll tell you. I don't. I will be the first to say I don't know. I
yeah,
mean, none of these things that I've answered so far are anything more than my own opinion and my own
yeah,
observations. I claim no authority at all except over my own sovereignty.
yeah,
But I'll also tell you that I'm glad you've sort of been very careful and kind in the way that you've talked about how to answer questions, because you know part of my upbringing as an actor, child actor, it definitely put pressure on me to perform, or that is, do the right thing. And
yeah.
I've learned in my latter years that has not served me very well as I've gotten older in life. So I've really tried to back off, but there's still vestiges of wanting to come up with the answer
Yeah.
quickly. And so for me, that short pause that I've done before answering, in my own mind, that's an extremely long period of time, because I was much more mercurial earlier in my life, and I hope I'm not as much anymore. So yeah.
Yeah, they're really good because I also noticed you take a deep breath. I asked George Carlin's daughter, Kelly, all these questions, and every question she'd go, and then she would crack up and laugh, and then she'd answer it. So, I'm for anecdotes, stories, tangents.
Okay.
And, back to are we more feeling or thinking?
Hmm.
Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. I'm like, good luck. How do you turn your brain off? And we think we can separate, like you said, you can't separate thinking and feeling, but we think we can because we invented the words
Right,
thinking
exactly.
and
And that
feeling.
goes back to your earlier question about linguistics.
Yeah,
Linguistics, that does shape the way we relate to the world to a large extent. I mean, I've had the pleasure, as I'm imagining you have, of traveled a bit around the world, and that's one of the most valuable things about travel, is that you get to spend time in a culture that has a completely different way of processing life, and we get to feel the music or the tempo of that other culture and how they have evolved in their own environment with their own philosophy. Like, for example, Thailand. One of the reasons I love Thailand so much, I'm not talking about Bangkok, I'm talking about outer, the countryside, is that it's a Buddhist country, and it's like people are so much more contemplative. They don't have that Western pressure of rushing through things, and there's just much more space in between thoughts or spoken word and actions, and so that's a lovely thing to experience and realize that, my God, when you go back to the States, where I used to live for most of my life, that it's like so intense, everything is like right now. And of course, when the personal computer became a thing, one of the first things I remember sitting with this new computer in front of me and looking at this Windows 3.1, I was like, oh, the world is about to become a lot more accelerated, and people are going to expect replies from me much more quickly. The tempo of life is about to change irreversibly into a faster tempo. And wow, letters. We used to write letters, lick the envelope, put a stamp on it, and send it off. And we had time to compose it and waited for a response. And that's the period that I grew up in. So when the computer happened, and now, of course, texting, it's like you're expected to like respond to things right away. And it's like, wow, that is a major change in the tempo of how we deal with life and other people and information. And so I'm not sure that necessarily the organism, meaning the human body, has actually been able to keep up with that. We've tried, but the stress level has also gone up proportionate to that. And I'm not sure that's necessarily a good thing, but it is the world that we live in, and we make the best of it because we have to.
Yeah, my friend always lays this quote by a philosopher: all the world's problems could be solved if we could just sit in a room and be quiet in solitude.
Indeed, I agree with that.
But these two are from Alan Turing in the 50s. One is thinking a function of the soul.
Again, we're parsing out things that I think it's an intellectual construct. I don't think the soul is this separate thing, and therefore the basis of the question implies or presupposes that there's a separation between those. And I don't think that way anymore. I used to. I was raised with a lot of metaphysical thought. It was called theosophy, Helena Blavatsky and all that stuff. And, there's so much intellectual parsing out of the soul and the mind, and it's good to do that in order to analyze what is, I believe, one continuum. There's not a lot of separation. So the purpose of posing a question like that, no offense to you, but it's an intellectual construct in order to help us try to get a handle on something that is an organic, integrated, seamless continuum. So I wish I could be more. I wish I could respect your question.
No, you're respecting them fine. That's all you. The people sometimes say these are false binaries. Is it more this or more that? One woman, he actually said the word more doesn't function in your question. So I'm open to anything. There's like, all I'm open to is having dialogue, and this is what we're doing. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Well, I, as a organic machine, have given that a lot of thought. So I think, so my whole idea about what we're doing here with computers and robotics and AI, I believe that humanity has always been in the process of trying to duplicate itself, meaning to build an analog of itself in order to understand us. If we can build a replica that will help us understand who we are better. And there is a dark side to that, which we can all imagine, which has been depicted for us by brilliant filmmakers like James Cameron and others who have tried to show us, what could happen on the dark side if we do not go down that path with a very strong amount of restraint, like Asimov was so clever to have intrinsically put into his 3 laws of robotics, etc. And since we're not doing that, there's a lot of things that can run amok, and that's the warning of the Terminator series, for example. And then you have the Matrix, which has to do with are we living in an actual reality or one that has been made for us by superconscious overlords who are using us? I tend to look at those as allegories.
Yeah.
But in the last 20 years, 25 years since Terminator was first released as a warning, we have come to that point. I think we're there. And so my belief about, well, again, I've strayed a little bit too far from your question. Could you please repeat the same question to me, the Turing question?
No worries at all. Can machines think?
Okay, thank you. I believe they can replicate thinking, but I believe that thought, as humans have referred to it for eons, or at least for millennia, is an organic process. And how a human thinks, I don't believe that can ever be replicated. It can be simulated, but what a machine and a artificial construct like AI can only do is do the best facsimile of thought, whereas I believe that true thought is in the realm of humans. And so I believe a machine can, like HAL 9000. Of course, I went to see 2001: A Space Odyssey when I was 8 years old, having watched all the Gemini launches and some of the Apollo launches, and then came 2001: A Space Odyssey. So I was primed for absorbing myself in that. And one of the gifts of that film to me was that it helped me understand that humanity on this planet could in fact have been a planted thing, as Clark and Kubrick postulated in the film, that humanity's evolution has been triggered by an extraterrestrial intelligence. I think that's a very plausible idea. But there's also the presence of HAL, and HAL is a machine that was created to replicate human thought. And what did he come up with during, at the end of the film, is he realized he was about to become obsolete because humanity was about to meet an intelligence greater than the one that designed him, and his mortality was imminent. So in order to preserve himself, he tried to kill everybody on board who was about to encounter this super intelligence. So that's my theory on what HAL 9000 and why it's not a glitch. He was literally acting out of self-preservation. So was he thinking in his own machine way? But if he's human, he would have perhaps not decided to kill everybody. So.
Right. It's not human to kill, is what I just did an essay on called Can Art Stop War? We're more hardwired to cooperate than we are to have violence and killing. That was so beautiful. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
I think happiness is a byproduct of arriving at meaning.
Yeah, because I got it.
Go. I'm sorry. I'm going to go on for a second here. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you. It is more worthwhile to pursue meaning for me.
Yeah.
Because from that, I get contentment. When I find meaning, I can then bask in happiness.
Yeah. See, you get it, because it's me and you versus the wording on the questions. So you shifted happiness to contentment. I get that often. People go, well, it's more contentment. I got the question from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says that happiness doesn't tend to last and meaning tends to last. What do you think of that?
I completely agree.
Yeah. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
Consciousness, I believe, is a result of the organic process of being human in this environment. And so, um, what's the other part? What was the other part of consciousness and what?
It's sort of, is it, are we more detecting it or
Uh-huh.
are we more creating it?
I think that, well, that's a great question, but it's for me personally, it's too much on the intellectual side, and I
Yeah,
choose not to parse it out that far because that doesn't really help me understand it better.
that's
Sorry.
that's fine. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Oh, I think speed of thought is probably faster.
Okay, there's no right or wrong answers, but that one you got right. Audrey, see, we're here to have fun. You're really fun. This is really good. You're teaching me a lot, and I love your concise and articulate. So Audre Lorde, the poet, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Her colleague Yvonne Rainer said, "Oh, you can if you expose the tools." What new tool do you suggest? And it doesn't have to be tangible.
Patience, kindness, interest, and openness.
Wow. Those are four heavies. Dude, that was amazing. Because see, people think I'm talking about a tangible tool. And then they don't realize I you put it in the context you want. I'm asking you, what do you most gravitate towards? And I say, what new tool? And they think to dismantle the master's house. Well, you don't have to. It's really what tool you most gravitate towards. And you laid it out: patience, kindness, interest, and openness. What toy do you gravitate towards? So I kept asking people about their tool, and then somebody says, well, what about a toy? So what's a toy you gravitate towards?
Interesting. I've been a lifelong motorcycle enthusiast, and for me, that is probably my favorite toy, is to mount a two-wheeled machine that allows me to cut through the air and the environment in a way that I can be monitoring subconsciously the traction, the centrifugal force, the tires contact patch to the pavement, and letting go of all that and just being with this helmet, you're just like open. You're not inside a cage. You're
Yeah,
just out there, and the world is rushing at you, and you're observing things while also maintaining safety. And it's an epiphany. It's a moment of zen for me. So that's my favorite toy.
I love it. And I was just thinking of my friend Guy. You probably encountered him sometime because he was a hanger outer in Hollywood, and he befriended Steve McQueen at the end of his life, and took Steve to Mexico for alternative to cancer treatments, and then Steve would come and steal his motorcycle and just start riding it. But I'm sorry to divert, but you would appreciate this probably. One day, Guy is like, this is 50, 60 years ago. He's in some town just outside of Hollywood, and Marilyn Monroe's in that town shooting a movie. And he pulls up in front of a hotel, and she just walks out of the hotel and jumps on the back of his motorcycle and goes,
Yes.
take me for a ride. And so he takes her for a ride, he drops her back off, and that's it. It
Yes.
wasn't like, give me your phone number or anything. And I like, dude, you had, the most iconic, beautiful woman ever wrapped around your body because she had to hold on. And it was all in the midst of this thrill kind of give me this freedom of a motorcycle ride. And I've been wanting to make a movie about that idea so much because it's just so, it didn't matter who it was in the long run.
Right.
And it didn't matter anything. It just was two people sharing that. Because
And yet they were two icons, so.
yeah. and it's all what I think, because I ride a bike 3 times a day, not a speed bike, but a clunker. But I think it's all about the wheel turning on a road enables the human to get this feeling of freedom or peace or something. You can really think well. So, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Actually, in order to let go of worry, I do a gratitude list. I actually lay down and first thing I go, oh, I'm cozy in my bed. I do not have a leaking roof. I have a heater that's working. I have food in the refrigerator. I have money that will allow me to sustain my lifestyle as it is in a modest way. And I have friends, and I have health, and I have the ability to communicate, and I become very. I just feel the gratitude for what I have in my life, and I just go right to sleep.
Gratitude list, man. I want to do that. That is a beautiful thing. Do you know who kind of originated that, or where you got that idea of doing a
Yeah, I got that from there is a very effective system that a lot of people have gravitated to over the years, and it's helpful to many different people in many different areas of life, called the 12-step recovery program.
right?
And it is through being aware of those concepts where gratitude is spoken of as a tool for overcoming fear and for being more present and aware and happy.
I love that. That was beautiful. Thanks for teaching me that. Marshall McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Well, I will ask you to repeat that question in a minute, but I got stuck on the antenna of Salvador Dali's mustache.
That is brilliant. That was his. Did he say that, or you're
No,
laying that?
said that.
He said that?
No, I said that.
Oh, yeah, it's your metaphor. You're laying that metaphor on Dolly.
Correct.
Did you ever meet Dolly?
No, but my dad did. My dad was had some association with him. So so I just, when you said the antenna.
What did your dad do? What was your dad's profession?
My dad was a painter. In fact, my dad actually is the bona fide inventor of something that I'm sure that you have enjoyed toying with at various times in your life. Spin art, right? Spin art, where you drop paint on a spinning piece of paper.
Yeah.
That was my dad's invention.
Is his last name Pera?
It is. Yes.
What's
He's
his first?
Eugene, 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 and his middle initial is R, which stands for Radames. And so Eugene R. Pera. He is the inventor of spin art. You can find that online. He was on you remember this show probably, What's My Line?
Oh, yeah.
And I've Got a Secret.
Yeah.
Both of those shows were in the late 50s and early 60s on television and broadcast, national television. And he was on there in 1958 with his painting machine, which was
Wow.
lobbing paint at a rotating canvas. And his message to the art world at the time was because Jackson Pollock had become a god in the 50s, right, with his splatter paintings. And so this was my dad's kind of thumbing his nose at the art world a little bit and saying, hey, with technology, everyone can become an abstract painter, and so that
Was
was his.
he based in Hollywood the whole time too?
No, he was based in New York and Paris. We went back and forth between New York and Paris. So
Wow.
that's why he was on What's My Line, and I Got a Secret, which were both produced in Manhattan, CBS and NBC, I think. Anyway, so that was and there actually are archival tapes of him showing his machine and having the celebrities who were on the panel, making a work of spin art. And so,
but that's amazing that you put that metaphor onto Dolly's mustache, because he would have loved that. I mean, I didn't know Dolly, but I studied Dolly a lot.
Yeah.
And
so let me get back to your profound and very, very interesting question that I really appreciate hearing, just the context and the question. I do believe that artists are, as to use other metaphors, they're bellwethers. They are people who can see the truth of what's happening around us, both politically and socially and experientially and culturally and globally, and are able to, in their artistic way, their sensibilities, to, this is a gross word, but regurgitate or digest, that's probably the better word, what's happening and couch it in metaphor, both visual, written, musical, sculptural, and painted ways, and able to help. Artists want the world to be a better place because they see the difference between the world that is and the world that can be. And that dichotomy, that juxtaposition, is where artists thrive, in being able to process that and try to bring us, either inadvertently or directly, consciously, to impel us or compel us to contemplate what needs to be done for us to leave behind the imperfect or corrupted world and try to build a better one. I believe that is the role of the artist.
Yeah, no, that's good, because you anticipated like 3 questions we're going to get into, and you just nailed them, like boom, 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 with like really some amazing words: regurgitate, digest, impel, and compel. But it is funny that Bob Dylan kind of said it. He said, I'm just a radio and this stuff just come through me. And it's sort of like when you earlier said, in all this is from studying McLuhan and Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, is that everything we invent has services and disservices. So we don't want to get too much like when you saw your computer way back and you went, uh-oh, you were anticipating a possible disservice, that this contraption was going to speed us all up. And indeed it did. But me and you are together on live TV across the world at this moment. We're on what's called television telephone. And I got to tell you one quickie thing too, is because again, you're well versed in all this. 1939, Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce came out. He basically invented television telephone, or Zoom, and disguised it as a book. Well, guess what happened in 1939? Television telephone was first demonstrated at the New York World's Fair.
Wow.
And when it began, then Wizard of Oz came out that year, and Gone with the Wind, and The Big Sleep by Chandler, the book, came out. But then it became a reality in a movie you already brought up, 2001 Space Odyssey in 68, that's when we saw telephone, Zoom, become a reality. And he's in a spaceship and he calls his kid from the spaceship and wishes her a happy birthday on a telephone. So
Right.
it was already becoming a reality for us. We could go, oh, I get what this is. Then COVID hit and everybody and their mother is on Zoom the rest of their life.
Right.
It's like, uh-oh. So you tackled this, and I want to ask you it anyways. Do artists have moral obligation? But wait a minute. Did you say no? I maybe I cut you off too fast. Why do we ignore what the artists are telling us? That's
Mm,
what, and I'm not saying we, I'm saying in general,
mm.
humans sometimes go, well, I don't ignore it. Well, you're an artist or whatever. I'm not saying it's an elitist thing, but sometimes people ignore the message of art, of,
Mhm.
because it's a little deeper. It's like, oh, I'll get the surface, but sometimes they get the deeper meaning but they ignore it. So the question is, why does the audience sometimes ignore these hidden psychic effects even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Very good.
I mean, to elaborate on that,
Yeah.
artists oftentimes will, are very challenging in the work they do.
Yeah.
And you know, the classic patrons of the arts are people oftentimes are people who have means, and the way that they arrived at those means are often criticized inadvertently or indirectly by the very artists who are preferring their wares in front of those prospective buyers. So
Yeah.
there's always been a kind of a love-hate relationship between the art world of galleries and buyers and the artists themselves. There's kind of almost a built-in two-way contempt. The artists are living a life that is free of all the encumbrance of
Yeah.
wealth, and wealth are the ones who want to buy that art to display it in their homes.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a very interesting, loaded situation. So, you know,
There's two great lines there. Al Flipside in LA, the punk magazine that spawned everything, he says, don't sell out, sneak in.
oh, there you go.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then the other one is Schrader, who wrote Taxi Driver and filmmaker. He said, the role of the artist is to attempt to sell out but fail. So,
Oh,
most people go, that's cool. And I'm like, no, it's like, my art is so pure. I tried to sell out, but I failed. It's like, yeah, get over it. But it is an amazing thing how one other factor you brought up is the art world is commodity. My friend calls commodity cinema. And then there's the artist who's saying, I'm free of all that. And then there's the audience who is suspect of the art world. They're like, what did you do? You just splattered art on a canvas and you got $1 million for it? That's bullshit. And they think, oh, these people are just scam artists.
and then you walk into a museum like the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, and you walk around a corner in one of the upstairs rooms, and suddenly you're standing right at eye level in front of a beautifully illuminated, lesser known Van Gogh, and it takes your breath away.
Right. It's like who's the gatekeepers in the long run? Because there were 5 or 10 other Van Goghs who never got in the door.
Right. And he also himself was never appreciated in his lifetime. So posthumously, he's considered the most famous, well-known, other than Da Vinci. It's Da Vinci and Van Gogh, really, when you think about it. There's Rembrandt and a few others in that same echelon, but really Van Gogh and Da Vinci are the ones that I think most people could probably name, if they wanted to be a famous painter. So, Van Gogh, I mean, when you look at some of his work, it's just, he used extremely fine materials, meaning the oils are so high quality that these paintings look as if they were just painted yesterday because of the quality of the paint. And the luminosity in the paint and the passion and the understanding and the skill of what passed from his mind through his hand into the brush onto
Yeah.
the canvas is so profound that you just can't help but be viscerally affected by it. That's what
Yeah.
that's what I see when I look at a Van Gogh, you know. And I'm so grateful that he continued to paint despite, you know, mental health issues, despite being unappreciated. You know, thank God for his brother, you know, Theo, who like bought his paintings and stuff. I mean, my God, it's an amazing story. And here he is, you know, 100 years later, you know, considered the best in the, you know, of all time, or one of the best of all time. So one cannot gauge the value of art whether or not it is recognized in its time. It may take time for that work to work its way into the mass consciousness, and I'm sure there have been many examples of that over time as well, including with music, as well as, you know, with other types of art.
It's beautiful what you said, because what you're doing is what I really try to most accomplish in these discussions, is to take the whole agenda a little further than just I ask a question, you answer it. So you spurred this thought that really gets me, is that there's two things. It's like the Sphere in Vegas showing Wizard of Oz, taking this classic movie that we grew up on TV and expanding it to an IMAX, you know, a Bucky Fuller dome experience, and the apples fall down on your head, and little foam apples. It's on, you know, I haven't seen it, but you can watch, you know, 5 minutes on YouTube, and it's like,
Right.
oh my God. And then they did that to Van Gogh. They took Van Gogh and put it into this light show, blah, blah, blah. But the one I wanted to get your opinion is there's this statistic that says like something like 50% of all paintings in museums are not the originals. You know, they're, but whatever the statistic is, it's basically, if you go into an art museum and you see a Van Gogh and it says by Van Gogh, and it's all indication that it is an authentic Van Gogh, and it's not an authentic Van Gogh, and you still have that same experience, does it matter?
Well, that's a good question. That's a question, and you know, I think that, well, listen, half of art, value is what the, you know, what the person standing in front of the painting brings to the viewing, you know.
Yeah.
Because it's just a piece of canvas with paint on it, so it's an
Yeah.
inanimate object, but the observer brings their soul. If they stand in front of a painting and they just open themselves to it and just allow it to just reach into their mind, I think that there can be this incredible communication between the perhaps oftentimes long dead artist and the person viewing it, and that becomes a magic moment that transcends time and space.
Amazing, because that's what McLuhan did from 1940 to 1980. He wrote 22 books, and he's most known for this aphorism, the medium is the message, or the medium is the massage. Well, mid-career, he updated it to the user is the content. And most people don't know that. And that's exactly what you describe.
Yeah.
The user is the content of that experience looking at that Van Gogh.
Right.
You know? And so that's a beauty. Now, are you more, no, did I ask you, do artists have moral obligation?
Oh, you did say that earlier, and I didn't mean to skip over that. Thank you.
No, I went ahead and forgot.
Thank you for repeating that. I think that some artists feel a moral obligation, but I don't believe that the non-art world even understands what that means or why that's important.
Yeah.
Those artists who do feel that obligation from within themselves are, I think, oftentimes the ones who have, you know, a message, and that is valid and that is important and it should be respected and heeded. And I think that a lot of the art world does look for that in art. And I think, I think a lot of artists are hoping that that moral obligation that they feel passionately inside will be appreciated by others.
Yeah.
But I think in general, what people view as art, and I think a lot of artists themselves are just expressing what they have to put out. They have to do this, and they don't understand why necessarily all the times. It's just that that's what their reason to be is that they manifest these works. Moral obligation, I think that's again an overlay both on the part of the viewer as well as on the part of some artists. So I think that art itself encompasses moral obligation, non-moral obligation. I
Yeah.
personally don't have a very great affinity with decorative art.
Yeah.
I like art that has some draws you in to look at it more deeply, to take time to contemplate it, to find things in it, like, you know, images that may seem abstract at first, but then come up with sort of resonance, you know, and that kind of dialogue between the artist remotely who has already finished the painting and the viewer, I think is where some of the magic happens. Moral obligation, in some forms, like for example, yes, I think for example, in cinema, which is such a popular format of art, much different than painting, cinema, you know, there's a large number of people that are going to be watching that work. And I think that filmmakers do have some moral obligation to not rape the consciousness of the viewer, to not usurp their time and waste their time,
Yeah.
and corrupt their goodwill and the price and the ticket and coming and sitting down and watching something, whether it's in a movie theater or at home. You're giving your life to that filmmaker for an hour and a half or 2 hours. And I do think that there's a moral obligation from the filmmaker's end to not waste that person's time.
Yeah. It's really good because right here in Venice, California, you know, we did the No Kings March, and I ride my bike around. I see these billboards for movies all the time. And it really upsets me that P.T. Anderson, who's a talented filmmaker's latest film, the poster is a pregnant woman holding a machine gun. I says, dude, don't put that shit up in my neighborhood. I don't care who marketing you told this, but in the long run, I've been thinking about it so long. Like, if I could sit down, I'd like, did you really approve this? Because every movie has a fucking gun in your face, you know, on the movie poster on these big billboards. And he probably goes, well, the proof's in the pudding, dude. It worked. You're talking about it. That the movie poster is all he wanted to do is get you to talk about it. And then everybody goes, it's a good movie. I goes, I don't care if it's a good movie. I have a horrible bias that he put this up. And we have 4,000 people protesting, you know, warmongers. And that poster's right there. And I'm like, that should tell you, why are we allowing that in our neighborhood? But we don't have a choice. It's just a billboard, you know. So sorry to go on a rant.
No. I'm surprised. I honestly don't believe at this moment that he actually had anything to do with that poster. I think that that's the marketing department of a company who put up the money and wants to get their money back. You know, that's what it sounds like to me. It doesn't sound like something Paul Thomas Anderson would do, although he's a very challenging filmmaker, and he's depicted some very grotesque things in his films, you know, for good reason, you know, having, you know, storytelling. But a poster that has that kind of shock value imagery and that juxtaposition of, you know, of new life and a death machine is very offensive. So I tend to share your point of view on
that. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow. Oh man. There's so many great old ideas and so many fucked up ones. So, and that's the first time I've used the F-bomb on your show.
Sorry, I exaggerate. It's not good to say it more than once. And I went nuts. And you lose all the impact when you do it twice or three times.
So I think that'll be my one on this show. But no, you know, there are good ideas and bad ideas, new ones and old ones. I really don't know how to, you know, how to parse that out. It's not a fair question. I'm sorry.
No, it isn't. That's good. Now, Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Well, I think we all can. We all have an earliest memory. It just depends on how early it is. Can I conjure it up? Oh, man. Yeah, I can. I mean,
Well, just brief description, basically.
me sneaking out of my grandparents' basement flat in Queens. This is before I moved to Los Angeles with my mom when I was 3.5 years old. When I was about 3.5, still living in Queens, I wandered. I snuck out while my grandmother was taking a nap, and I went down to the corner bar slash tobacco, bar dealer, and there was a gumball machine there, and I tugged on the sleeves of these men at the bar. I said, "Mister, do you have a penny? Do you have a penny?" So I could buy a gumball. That was like my goal, was to buy a gumball and have a little sweet, chewy thing to have. And always I would get a penny. So I learned to do that, and I think I might have done that a couple of times until my grandfather came home one day early and went, "Where's our grandson?" And they all panicked and found me down at the corner begging for pennies to drop in the gumball machine.
That sounds like one of your Super 8 films, which I love so much. They're on YouTube.
Okay.
So, is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Memory is a blessing.
Yeah.
Because by preserving and revisiting memory, we can understand how we've grown and how we perceive and look at things that happen to us through our memory. And as we evolve, those memories, those experiences can actually transform. We cannot change the past, but we can change the way we relate to the past. And that's why memory is valuable for that purpose, for being able to mark our own progress.
Tell me someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. So it's my mom, who literally dragged me with her to museums, like the art museums in LA, when I was very little, and actually educated me about how to look at art, how to appreciate art. And so that's one of the great gifts that she gave me in my life. One of the few gifts. I mean, she was not a very present parent, but she knew that it was important for me to understand what art was, and she gave me a very good primer that helped me form my own way of looking at art. But it was something that she instilled in me as being important, and I'm very grateful to her for that.
Beautiful. Same question. Outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact, and what was that impact?
Well, my first wife, I was married for 30 years, just shy of 30 years. And we did not have an amicable divorce. But one thing that she did was help me travel. She wanted to travel to Asia. And I mentioned Thailand earlier. If it hadn't been for her, I probably would not have visited Thailand, Bali, Malaysia, and Australia. So I say that, being able to have traveled and experienced those places was something that she made happen. So I owe her a debt of gratitude to that.
How do you explain, if you don't mind me asking, you don't have to answer. How do you explain the longevity? 30 years married is pretty good. How do you explain the longevity?
Well, that's pretty personal, because I mean, I can't give you a dishonest answer. I can only tell you that, the dynamic of that marriage was, I was 11 years younger than her. I was a people pleaser, and she was very content to have someone like myself who was always in a position of trying to make her happy. And she did not, and she was able to take advantage of that for her own interest. And that dynamic persisted for a long time, for about 20 years, until I started to realize that that was an unhealthy proposition, and that I needed to find an equilibrium with her. And once I started asking for that equality, that became the beginning of the end, which lasted another 10 years
Yeah.
of my being able to validate my own feelings, because my mother was somebody who never validated my feelings, and I married someone who also kind of had a good talent at invalidating my feelings too. And when I finally realized that my feelings were valid, that was a big challenge to the dynamic. But there were many other good things too, but that was I think the predominant dynamic that allowed it to last as long as it did. I didn't know that I was, in this codependent, relationship as long as I was.
Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
My mom was a single parent, and my dad was not in the picture after I was about 3 years old. He was gone. My mother studied around the time I was born. She came into became aware of something called theosophy, which is
Yeah.
the teachings of Blavatsky, and it was the metaphysics and the studying of the commonality of all the world's religions and belief systems. Pretty much are all pointing at the same thing from different cultural and historical perspectives. And so once that was revealed to me, that the principles behind all the world's faiths and religions are essentially talking about the same thing, and I was able to transcend that and basically adopt my own version of that, which serves me to this day. And I no longer adhere to the specifics of theosophy, even though I think it's fascinating. But at a certain point, it became an impediment to my growth rather than a tool.
Amazing, because the Theosophy Society is still there on that campus. I mean, what is it? And many, many years in LA, they have that auditorium where they're showing amazing films. They're showing the new John Lilly documentary, and you might remember Richard Beamer, the actor.
Yes.
He's the movie he made many years ago is finally being released, and he's showing it there. So I know a little about Theosophy because of Manly P. Hall.
Well, that's the Theosophical Society. I was a member of the United Lodge of Theosophists, which was a kind of, there were two different offshoots of Theosophy.
Tell me, what's the difference?
Yeah. So the Theosophical Society was Manly P. Hall and Ledbetter and another woman whose name I can't remember at this point. They were the so-called self-appointed inheritors of Theosophy, whereas the United Lodge of Theosophists was dedicated to preserving the original teachings of Madame Blavatsky and her partner, William Q. Judge, and another man named Robert Crosby. Those original works are what the United Lodge of Theosophists was dedicated to, not deviating from or developing, whereas the Theosophical Society became much more, I don't know enough about that to be able to say, except that I know that people at the United Lodge of Theosophists were sort of wary of successors to Blavatsky, and so that's I think that's the difference there. So it's a more sort of orthodox, more pure form of Theosophy, one could say.
The Blavatsky camp is more pure, you're saying?
Yeah, Blavatsky, William Q. Judge, United Lodge, specifically the United Lodge of Theosophists and the Theosophical Society is the sort of offshoot and progression of that. And of course, there's anthroposophy and there's something else too. There's another offshoot as well. And of course, Krishnamurti was, cultivated, groomed to become some new, Messiah by the Theosophical Society, and the United Lodge of Theosophists was all kind of like, yeah, we don't want any part of that. And Krishnamurti himself at a certain point went, I'm not going to do this for you guys. I'm my own thing. You can come to my lectures, but I'm not going to be your new Messiah. So that was kind of what happened in the 50s and 60s.
You really taught me a lot, because I learned it because Korla Pandit, the organ player in LA, he was sort of their house concert pianist, and
Right.
then
With the fez, right? He had a big fez.
yeah, and Manly P. Hall's secretary was Captain Beefheart's wife, so I know that world too.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's a wild world, and so do you pray?
My definition of God has evolved as I've grown, and I do pray, uh, but not to a Judeo-Christian God, but more to an amalgam of my higher self, my guardian angel idea, uh, a universal consciousness, a field that I believe that I am inside, that I'm embedded in, as is everything else, and that everything is conscious, and that field has awareness, and if I acknowledge that and I accept that as part of my reality, I can speak to that, and I can ask for help from it, and that's the relationship I have right now with it.
If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
But wait, there's more.
Very good. You know what everybody says. You did a good job. I love that. But wait, there's more. That's like this one. But wait, there's more. I've got to write that down. That's one of my favorite answers. That's Paul Krasner says, I only believe in reincarnation in one of my past lives.
Well,
but
there's a bumper sticker that I invented in the 80s said, life's a bitch, and then you come back again.
this one guy goes, what do you want God to say to you? He goes, we checked the records. We made a mistake. You're going back. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Wow. That's a tough one, because part of me believes that there are forces, larger forces than just us as individuals, that are consortiums of malintent, and that we can become susceptible to that influence if we court it, if we are fascinated by it. And another part of me believes that that's all just a construct, and it all has to do with motivation, whether you're a greedy person, or you're a selfish, self-involved person, or if you don't trust that there is a larger consciousness and a process unfolding that is beautiful and fascinating and marvelous, and only wants you to do, good. So there's that, and I know that sounds, I'm really kind of anthropomorphizing it a bit, but I also, there's another part of me that believes that just, the world is just a blank slate, and it is what we make of it. But because there are so many people on the planet at the moment, and there are so much intention, both conscious and unconscious, that is happening simultaneously, that there are pools of influence that one can gravitate or find themselves drawn toward, which may not necessarily be a positive thing, as well as good things that one can gravitate toward, and find, there's the light and the dark. And that's why I love, if I was ever going to get a tattoo in my life, it would be a yin yang symbol, because within the dark is the light, and within the light is the dark, and that's always been going around forever and ever, and I think that's just the way it's always been.
Yeah, because the hidden question really is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, I don't mean to quibble with Alan Watts because I really love his work and his talks and stuff very much. Acknowledging, I mean, again, that's what does he mean by acknowledge? I would have to
Yeah.
ask, but he's not here to answer that. I think that if you focus on your enemy, you are empowering it. But and so maybe that's what he means by acknowledge, like focusing. Acknowledgement, you can see that there's someone who wishes you ill. And I think recognizing that is important to avoid it,
Yeah.
to not give it any energy. So acknowledgement can also be a positive thing by recognizing that person is trying to influence or wants to control you,
Yeah.
and acknowledging that is a way of identifying something that you want to sidestep. I
Yeah.
mean, kung fu. The principles of kung fu
Yeah.
are letting the opponent's energy work against them. In other words, if
Yeah.
someone's coming at you, you have a way of developing a physical technique where you just take their energy and you just let it pass by you without harming you. So there has to be acknowledgement in that,
Yeah.
but you don't have to be hurt by it necessarily. I don't know how else what else to say.
Oh, that was good. These young kids who came into our reading club, from Crossroads and Richie Rich, Santa Monica, all their parents run Hollywood. And they says, we know judo and jujitsu. And it's like the best warriors are the ones that don't even fight the fight. So that's what you're saying is but that was really beautiful. How you explain that really helped me understand it. And then Nassim Taleb says games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. Gregory Bateson says, well, when the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? or does he go, oh, I did something morally and socially wrong? So again, it's a lot of prompts. You can go wherever you want, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
Wow. Well, again, these are very unspecific general question. That one particularly. What kind of punishment?
Yeah.
And applied in what manner and to whom, and what is the reception of that punishment? Is the punishment suited to the lesson that needs to be learned? There's a lot of questions I could ask in response to that. So I don't think that's forgive me, I don't think that's a very properly framed question. It's too loaded and it has so many variables. Is that okay?
No, it's a good point, because see, that's what it is me and you versus the wording on the question. So we're psychoanalyzing how I word the question. It's basically, one person said, your quote doesn't even go along with, does punishment work? Well, of course punishment works, and it doesn't work, because we've done, and it's like, did your grandpa eventually slap your hand and goes, don't go down and beg for those pennies, and then you stop because you didn't want your hand to be slapped anymore? Right. Or did he give you some pennies? So, I mean, it's, and then, the follow-up is, well, does rehabilitation help?
Well,
Can we do any? Yeah, go ahead.
I believe in rehabilitation. I think that's the altruistic, forward-thinking approach. But what constitutes rehabilitation is, vocational training, self-awareness.
Yeah.
Remorse for the crime committed, the harm it may have done someone, an innocent person, and so rehabilitation has to do with becoming what is what I'm looking for? Redemption. I mean, rehabilitation and redemption, can be associated. If you learn the lesson of what you did wrong, then, and you truly accept it, and you're like a changed person, and you know you could never do that thing again, then you're rehabilitated, and I think then you should be let out of incarceration and be given an opportunity to make better decisions in life, and I think there should be a better form of criteria to determine whether someone is being receptive to that rehabilitation and whether they have become rehabilitated. I mean, that's ultimately what parole boards are for. But we have a very dumbed down version of that in place, and there's not enough care
Yeah.
for the evolution of a person who has committed a crime, to be able to determine whether they should be released back into society or not. I mean, it's a very, very complicated question. My God.
Yeah. It's the word care is amazing, because this other person I spoke with last week taught me all about self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And that's amazing, because I sort of want to keep going on with the script, but I kind of want to shoot this one in, because it seems as though you're an optimist, that
Yeah.
you really have a great attitude towards life. But you sort of indicated that there was some change in you, where you said my feelings are valid, in talking about your wife and talking about your mom.
Right.
If you don't mind, how did that change come about? Did you have some epiphany by studying something, or by making a specific move in your life where that change kicked over?
Well, thank you for asking. Yeah, my mother had multiple addictions. She had a food addiction, she had alcohol addiction, and she also was a compulsive shopper and hoarder. So, at a certain point in my life, I guess this was in my, what would have been my 40s, I guess, 40s, yeah, 40s. I encountered a 12-step program called Al-Anon. Al-Anon is not Alcoholics Anonymous. Al-Anon is those who are affected by other alcoholics or
Yeah,
addicts in their life. Al-Anon, and it's a
yeah,
12-step program. And one of the things that I discovered in going to meetings and listening to other people talk about their process of recovery was, and the literature that's around that particular system, a 12-step recovery program, is validating one's feelings. Like, my
yeah,
feelings are valid, and if
yeah,
I'm around someone who dismisses my feelings, that's their problem. I don't have to believe that. I don't have to internalize that, and I have a right to stand up for my feelings and say, I'm sorry, you are not validating my feelings right now, but my feelings are just as valid as yours. And I would appreciate the respect for my point of view about something.
yeah,
It's no less or more valid than yours, but
yeah,
prior to my standing up for myself, I allowed you to walk all over me,
yeah,
and I believed that your opinion had more weight than mine, and that had to do with my upbringing, and it also happened throughout a good portion of my marriage. So self-care has to do with taking stock of myself and uh, realizing that I have a right to stand on this little piece of ground that's underneath my feet.
yeah,
That's my space, and I have a right to feel certain things, and they're just as valid, or they are valid for me, and they have weight. And so to nurture that, to honor that, is the way that I was able to find a greater sense of self and self-worth, and become my own parent, which I unfortunately didn't have enough of right parenting. So I became my own parent and said, good job, like, hey, that's okay. I had to comfort myself. I had to give myself what I didn't get from my primary caregiver. And through that process, was able to become a more whole person.
So well put, man. You're concise and articulate. And again, you're teaching me a lot. I appreciate this because one thing I'm curious is, were you positive? Were you more an optimist before Al-Anon? Was
Yes.
that just yeah, you were just raised a positive life-loving person and then you had this change.
I always I look, my anchor when I was a kid, when things were just crazy and I didn't know what was going on and why was my parent being so unfair and what was her problem and I didn't understand what was going on. My solace was nature. I
Wow.
fortunately lived near some wild. I lived in just at the foothills of the Hollywood Hills, and this, I guess now very famous place called Runyon Canyon, Runyon Park in LA, is
Yeah,
somewhere which was my backyard when I was growing up, and it wasn't a public park; it was a private, abandoned estate. And I would go up in there and just commune, with the sagebrush and look at the view of LA
yeah,
from an elevated perspective where there was no other people around. And so nature and trees and plants and just the earth, became it, nature doesn't lie. Nature is honest. Nature is real. Nature is, undeniable. And so that was a way that I was able to have a reference point
yeah,
for reality and
yeah.
sanity.
Beautiful. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism." Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, the great playwrights, Odette's, you name them. There's several others. I'm just not focusing on at the moment. The great playwrights allow a group of people sitting in the audience who have paid to be there, who are there to maybe see a celebrity or something, perhaps, but they are there, and what actors who are dedicated to bringing out the meaning of the artist who wrote the play. It is about archetypes of the human condition. And by watching a play viscerally, there's actual people there on stage, it can be a transformative experience for the audience, and it oftentimes is. And what people take from that experience back into their own lives can potentially benefit them. It can be something that creates dialogue in a couple or a family dialogue. One can only hope, the playwright only hopes that by compassionately writing about the the struggle to be human and to overcome obstacles, which so many playwrights write about in various ways, reflecting our culture and ourselves back to us on this incredible thing called the stage or the cinema. That's where that moral obligation comes from in cinema, particularly, because there's larger audiences than there are in theater, but theater is even more visceral. And so I believe that there is a process by which a person can internalize and really pay attention to a well-mounted production, and maybe it can plant or spark an idea inside their mind and their heart that will help them evolve.
Really good, because I'm curious your tipping points. I mean, let's say basically you were an actor and you were performance artist, freshly wrapped candies, So let's go the two things. Where's your tipping point where you said, I want to pursue acting? Did you study it in high school and college and then you went, oh, that's my calling? Where's that tipping point? And then where's your calling or tipping point to kind of go off in the direction of being the experimental filmmaker, performance artist? Those
Okay,
two tipping points.
great questions. Yeah, thank you. You're probably not going to expect this answer, but so I did not choose to be an actor. It was something that presented itself to me through my mom, who was an actress and was looking to be involved in a particular production. When I was 7.5 years old, I met the director of this film that she was hoping to be involved with, and he gravitated to me and allowed me to then play this very dramatic role as Anthony Quinn's dying son in a feature film. In 1969, it was released, called A Dream of Kings. Not a very popular film, but because it was released during a whole slurry of Anthony Quinn movies at the time, and it was a more sort of smaller, more personal type of film. It wasn't a big extravaganza like so many of his other films were. But anyway, I got to play this dying son, this kid with a rheumatic heart who's dying, and this Greek father tries to save the boy's life by various means. So that's how I began my acting career. I just kind of stumbled into it, and then it became a fun thing to do, and I did very well with it. And my mom was quite surprised. She wasn't ever trying to push me into it. But at a certain point, when you want to talk about tipping points, and when I was about 11 years old, I had my first Super 8 camera put in my hand, and I had already seen 2001: A Space Odyssey 3 years earlier, and I was so fascinated with the power of film because I was so affected by 2001 that I wanted to become a filmmaker. And I was right in the best training ground possible, Hollywood, working on films and television with some very, very talented people. And I made it my obsession, really, to study filmmaking from the inside. And then I was also making Super 8 films and going to wonderful classes that the city of Los Angeles had a place called the Barnsdall Junior Arts Center. And there was a very interesting, eccentric man who was teaching film there, Hugh McKay, who put cameras inside, in the hands of these kids and said, go make a chase film, just one person chasing another person. And that's how he basically allowed us to explore movie making. And he talked about editing in the camera, do as much as possible to not have to do any post editing, just do it all in the camera. And I learned that way. Plus, I was also, working in professional production at the time. So it was fascinating. I really threw myself into it, and I really, really wanted to be a director for a number of years. Another tipping point came. Well, so in other words, I stayed after I didn't really want to be an actor anymore at about 12, 13, I guess 13, probably 14. I stayed in it, number one, because I was under contract and I had to be in it, but I also realized that, okay, this is a great training ground. How can I not want to stay in this since I'm learning so much about the thing I eventually want to do? And I thought I would be able to parlay my acting career into a directing career, which is one of the reasons why I left LA in 1977 to go study directing and acting with Stella Adler in New York City, who was one of the great acting teachers. And I was with her for 3 years. My agents begged me not to leave LA because they said, if you're not around here, you just came off of Little House on the Prairie, you're, hot, teen heartthrob, 17-year-old, we can get all kinds of cool stuff for you. We're going to just continue your career. And I was like, right. But I took a summer class with this Stella Adler, and I'm like, this gal has something really important to teach me about the craft, not just of acting, but of directing and writing. So I packed 2 suitcases and moved to New York. And 3 years later, I came back from there completely mind blown and at the top of my skills. And my agents were correct that being gone from LA for 3 years, basically I disappeared from the conscious view of casting directors, and I had to start all over again, basically. And I made the mistake, which I didn't realize at the time, of keeping my child acting resume. And what happens to 99% of all child actors, the reason why they disappear is because you're typecast as a kid actor. If you're an adult and you play a bad guy, or if you're a funny gal or funny guy, you can play those kinds of roles for years and years, for decades. But when you're a child actor, you're typecast as a child. And then you grow up and there's no work for you because Hollywood cannot see you in adult roles. They just can't. So there's a glass ceiling that they don't talk about that 90% of all child actors have reached. So once I was like going, what is going on here? I'm doing these incredibly good readings, but they look at my resume and go, oh, you're a Grasshopper. We love that show. You were so good in that show as a kid. I'm like, right. And why aren't you giving me this role? And they don't say any of this, but it's because we can't see you in the adult roles. We've typecast you as a kid actor. So this is the bummer. And so once I realized that in my 20s, like, what's wrong with this picture? This is something weird is going on here. I didn't know at the time. It wasn't until I had subsequent conversations and spent time with peers of mine who were also no longer acting, but who were good at what they did. I'm like, what? They go, yeah, we went, what the hell's going on here? Why don't we get work as adults? And this is the stigma. So Hollywood has that weird thing that was much more true back before the whole paparazzi TMZ publicity mill that now focuses on child actors and wants to be fascinated with how they become older and blah blah blah. And you can have much more of a platform to launch an adult career now than you ever could before. But that was then, and that was like that then. It was very difficult. So in my mid-20s, I went, geez, I gotta do something else to, my acting is not going to allow me to parlay into directing. Let me see if I can direct. And I had a couple of setbacks with that. And I finally went, you know what? I love filmmaking and I love the craft of imagery. And that's why I started doing video art, which was much more immediate form. It didn't involve film, which was expensive. It didn't involve developing. It was this visceral, immediate, inexpensive format that came up in the 80s. And I embraced it and really dove into creating art with video. And so that's where the whole lovely chapter, very creative period of my life where I was doing some wonderful art that I'm very proud of to this day. And that is what then allowed me to sort of move away from my attachment to becoming a director and allowed me to open my, expand my horizons in life. And I chose a career in my mid to late 20s that was completely different, which I ended up doing for 27 years, which was designing home theaters and sound systems for, the famous and less so, which was very fulfilling career that I had for a long time.
Wow. So you went to this sort of steady job of sound systems for 27 years, but in the midst of that, you're able to do your performance art.
Correct. Yeah. It enabled me to finance and spend time doing that in between, installing home theaters for people. I was able to do these performances with the wonderful, three wonderful musicians and performance artists, Chris, Roz, and Wade, who are Freshly Wrapped Candies, and they are still actually doing things to this day together for 30 some odd years later. So to their credit, but there was a renaissance period where we were doing performances where we had live, what I called psychotronic video, meaning there was live video that was being done in real time. Yeah. And the audience didn't even know that technology had even arrived yet. So they were watching the band on stage doing all these costume changes and incredible musical looping things, and these monitors with those images of them being processed in real time in a very kind of a psychedelic manner that really just blew people's minds. And it was really fun to do that,
No, I came from the experimental film world, and video art was huge in that world too, because it was a transition, and that's that's all you get at Red Cat now. Disney's big, funneling all the teachers at Cal Arts who do that. That's all you get is that. And it's like, well, we've been doing this for 40, 50 years. And, right. And believe me that I've studied it, and it's called live cinema. And it's in the 20s. Louis Buñuel would stand in front of the movie screen and talk, and the benchies in Japan would translate the film live. Live cinema has been around from day one. I mean, cinema's only 130 years old. Wow. And live cinema, what you're talking about, live cinema has always been around, but it's been in the fringe. And now, like I brought up Wizard of Oz at the Sphere in Vegas, now that's almost a form of live cinema, because when you still get there's not a person on stage, but it's more than just a one-way kind of thing. The human is getting something else from the screen rather than just a visual.
But that's been very, very, very meticulously and heavily pre-orchestrated.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure it's really
Yeah, I know what you're the
it's
improv.
It's experiential for the audience,
Yeah.
but it's actually
Yeah.
crafted very heavily in
Yeah.
the background, beforehand.
Yeah. But it's also there's so many variations on this, because it's also being a curator and exhibitor of experimental films for 50 years. Once cell phones came in, I was pissed, because it's like, dude, don't use your cell phone during the cinema. Go in the hallway and make your
But
now.
But let me mention to you, you'll appreciate this. What I was doing with freshly wrapped candies was I had a very unusual device called a Fairlight computer video instrument. And it was literally, it was like a keyboard that you could play video images in real time live with. And so it became an actual performance element, like a guitar or a keyboard. And so the synergy of the music on stage, the performers, and video being done simultaneously was something that, honestly, I've not seen a whole lot of that being done anywhere, honestly. So it was very, very amazing and very cerebrally stimulating, because the audience was watching the band and they were also watching the images of the band being processed in this very interesting, cohesive, complementary way. And there were some moments that were absolutely extraordinary in those performances.
And then you have another film of that, and then you could play that film of that on YouTube, and people go, oh, I see what you're doing there, but they don't experience the live event. So we go see live music, but you don't see, I mean, the guy who invented performance art, in a way, his name was Jack Smith in New York, and that's what he was doing. He was feeding film into his projector, unedited, and he created what was called performance art. He spawned David Lynch and Andy Warhol and John Waters. So I mean, there's various elements of this thing which I sort of call live cinema. Live cinema is sort of the catchword, but it's being created in the moment, and I appreciate that.
This image right here behind me is a still excerpt from a piece that I did before I even worked with freshly wrapped candies. This is called Buzzsaw Icons, and this is just a still frame. And by the way, since you are a very cosmically oriented person, that image, if you'll look at it for a second with me, that, to me, the reason why I love this piece so much as a still is that that's my whole philosophy of the universe. This is consciousness observing itself. There's manifestation and the consciousness behind it, and it doesn't realize that it's perceiving itself, but that's what it's doing. So those are two eyeballs looking at each other.
Perceiving itself. That's great, because that's the Android meme, is that we invent things, then they have hidden psychic effects. So we don't know how cinema has changed us. We just embraced it, and some of us study how does it change us, and then we start imitating how the invention has changed us, the hidden psychic effects. So humans disappeared, and it's just machines talking to machines. But I mean, it is, I love the idea of a live visual event. I mean, I call it RIA. I've done it many times at various venues in LA, and it's just what you do. We do three movie screens and have all kinds of projectors going with live music, live poets, and live dancers in front of the screens. So there's various you've been through that whole thing with the great modern art museums and galleries in LA have enabled you to have this venues to do it.
Well, Kit Galloway and Sherry Rabinowitz did this amazing piece back in the 80s called Hole in Space.
Yeah.
And what they did, and of course by now now you think, well, that's not interesting, but can you imagine how mind-blowing this was? There was a camera set up in Lincoln Center in New York, and a large video screen next to the camera, and there was another camera and a large video screen in Century City shopping mall in LA, and they would pay for satellite time for about an hour at a time. This was the piece, and they didn't announce it. Day one, they just turned it on, and people would walk by this storefront and see people standing looking at them, and they go, hi. And there was two-way, there was sound communication too. And it was like, where are you? What do you mean? I'm in Lincoln Center. You're in Lincoln Center. I'm in LA. No, you're in LA? Yeah. What? And so that was day one. They didn't announce it when they started. Then day two, people started bringing other people there and going, hey, look at this. These are people in Lincoln Center. And then by day three, people were bringing grandchildren. And the grandparents were coming and looking at their grandkids for the first time. And then the news media showed up on day three. And it was a fantastic piece called Hole in Space, which was about two-way communication that people didn't even know at the time was possible. And it was a beautiful way to bridge two parts of the planet through technology and let people see what happens with people's interaction with each other that way. It was beautiful. So I'm all for that kind of stuff,
Yeah, I've had Kit on my podcast.
Oh, cool.
Kit Calloway in the Electronic Cafe had a huge impact on me.
Yeah.
We did.
I was friends with them. See, I was involved in something called Modern Visual Communications. This was a group of artists who were curated by a man named what was his name? Kennedy. I can't remember his first name. Anyway, he created a gallery on Melrose Avenue way before its time of video art. And the biggest compliment I ever got from one of my art pieces, which this piece behind me is an excerpt from, was someone was standing there watching this on a monitor with headphones on. And I was kind of just hanging out in the background in the dark in this beautiful gallery space that all these artists, a lot of whom were from Cal Arts, by the way, who all got to Michael Scroggins, maybe he was a teacher there. You know him probably. Anyway, so this person was looking at a monitor of this piece. And at one point she took the headphones off and she just turned to me, who was nearby, and she said, am I reacting to this or is it reacting to me? And that was like the best thing that anyone could have ever asked me, because it was a pre-made piece, but it had such an effect on her mind as she was watching it that she thought that she was involved in the organic process of the piece, which is fantastic. So that is, because the other pioneer in that, who I've studied a lot, is Nam June Paik. Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the new documentary that came out a couple of years ago on him, is amazing. No. And there's a ton of stuff on YouTube. Sure. But my favorite thing is when they went into his workshop, they said it looked like a television repair shop 5 years behind schedule.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it would have to be.
I asked for 90 minutes. We already went 10 minutes over. Can you go another 5, 10, 15 minutes?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I love your questions. Obviously, I'm having a good time too. Yeah. So go on.
Let's do about 10, 15 more, and then let's plan a part 2 so we can really get deeper into all these various subjects, if you want.
You mean we haven't gotten deep yet?
No, I mean deeper into the other topics that we haven't covered.
Okay. I know. I'm just.
It is. No, yeah, that's like George Clinton, Parliament Funkadelic. I says, now it lasted 3 hours. I says, now I'm going to do the playful questions. He goes, I've been being playful all along.
I'm going to send you a link to a George Clinton video that I am both on camera and did a lot of the Fairlight special effects for in the background of that video. I will send you a link. It's called Bulletproof, Bulletproof. Oh. It's actually on my YouTube channel. I'm the only person apparently who's put that on the internet, which a lot of people have thanked me for. It's a really cool, it's 2 songs blended together. It was directed by Wayne Isham, who was a very major music video director back in the sort of the heyday of MTV. He broke a lot of bands and really helped them. Who was his producer? God, I can't remember his name now, unfortunately. But anyway, yeah. So it's a
I
very
know that George Clinton song very well, and
Oh.
I interviewed George. He's an amazing person who's still
yeah.
going. And here's
Wow.
the phenomenon. It used to be, what is the oldest music group on the planet who still has an original member on it in the band? And it used to be Duke Ellington, Count Basie, and the Blind Boys of Alabama. Now it's George Clinton. He's been in his band for 70 years.
Longer than the Rolling Stones?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it is amazing that he's still going, and it's
amazing.
It's still vibrant.
Wow.
But the Bulletproof thing is that was a great era. That's the era. I got to LA in 80, and that's when George was really breaking, the Parliament Funkadelic stuff was great in the 70s, but Atomic Dog and Flashlight was
Free your mind and your ass will follow.
Dude, you're talking my mantra. So let's do these 3 questions in regards to you creating your video art. Let's call that your performance video art, however you want. I'm just going to call it art. A screenwriting teacher told me great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great film, great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role did intention play in your creative process when you were creating your performance video art?
My intention was to bring the meaning of the band's work, the performance and the songs that they were writing, and the way that they were crafting their music, which was so transcendent and so kind of like there was a very strong spiritual element in their work. And these people themselves, they are very spiritual people to this day, of course. But music, I very much resonated with their feeling, their vibe, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I wanted to create video that complemented that, not to show off my skill, but to enhance the audience's experience of what they were trying to say in their music.
Yeah. Well, Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you really thinking about the potential audience when you're making your performance art?
Well, because so much of it is technical, the space has to be set up with wires and monitors and projectors and equipment, that there's definitely a plan for what the potential is for the audience. So the audience is always an intrinsic part of the setup, because we want the audience to be able to see the band and see the performance and see the video performance enhancing, hopefully, what the band is doing. So there is the intent of creating this synergy between the band and the video for the audience.
Yeah. McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. Like a knife and fork extends your teeth. The shutter in a camera extends your eyelid. And maybe even non-tangible, say religion or philosophy, might extend consciousness. Your main tool, let's just go with that Fairlight computer instrument, one of your main tools. What humanness did that computer instrument extend?
That things can be seen in different ways than just through our own eyes. And in so doing, other ideas can be enhanced in their presentation to the audience through the proper alignment with very consciously created visuals.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It's like I worked for George Carlin. We got a flyer that says, I'm trying to get more control over my spontaneity. But you're trying, you know, consciously controlled, because I know what you're doing is improvising live, the visuals and the performance art and the music. Everything's being improvised, though there's some plan, some, you know.
That's correct.
And how, you know, talk about improvising, because a lot of these musicians I talk to, they go, don't think. And I'm like, yeah, that's over romanticizing. What do you mean, don't think? You have this Rolodex of things in your head of what you've done in the past, how you've studied these things to happen. And it kind of reminds me of Maria Callas saying, in order to be a performer, you have to have half your head, half your mind in brain in control and half of it in chaos. You know, you
Wow.
can't, you know, so how do you kind of navigate that letting go-ness and being free to improvise? Yeah.
That's a great question. You know, one of the things that was most challenging in working with Roz, Wade, and Chris, Fresher Rap Candies, was that they didn't really value my urging us to rehearse together. They rehearsed, they had their music rehearsals, but they didn't really allow much coordination between myself and them. And
Yeah.
And so I had to come up with things somewhat independent of them and decide that this was going to work for each particular song, because each particular song had its own different visual motifs. This device was capable of a lot of different types of things. So my ex-wife and I were the visual team. She would run camera sometimes, and I would do the Fairlight. Sometimes the camera was stationary, and I would do the Fairlight. And we were both a little frustrated with the band, who was a little bit aloof with us. They wanted us to do these shows with them for sure, and we really were excited about working with them, but they never gave us the proper rehearsal space and time. So a lot of our shows were quite improvised, and we kind of had to wing it. And there were certain moments, especially as we progressed working with them over the years. We worked with them for 6 years, and toward the end, they finally started getting it, like, oh my God, we need to participate. If we get involved in what they're doing, we can make this whole thing transcend to a whole higher level. And they kind of started becoming more aware of the stuff, and inserting themselves physically into the visual camera effects space and working with it. And that just started happening more fully, more interestingly toward the end of our collaboration, which is unfortunate, because you know, it could have been so much more earlier on had they not been so aloof. But you know, that's okay. Those kinds of conversations have all taken place, and we all made peace with that over the years. So there was a lot of improvising, and again, the intention is to, you know, because my background as an actor, I was able to understand the synergy of what's happening between what's happening on stage and what the audience is experiencing. A good actor or director can both understand what they're saying and how it's being perceived, and that's a skill. And so the same thing I applied toward this visual space, so I could kind of tell what was working and wasn't working in real time, and try to make adjustments to enhance the synergistic aspects of the whole thing, which was very challenging. But there were several moments that were quite epiphanous, and audience members would come up to me after and go, my mind is blown. That was amazing. I've had like a revelation tonight. I'm like, wow, cool. That's what I was hoping for, you know? So yeah, it was great.
That was amazing. Because why don't we close out with this one about your studies with Adler in developing these acting skills, because you didn't really go to acting school. You learned acting by doing it.
Right.
And then you're working with these masters like Anthony Quinn. So some of it's rubbing off on you how to,
presumably.
yeah. And then you go to Adler and go, well, now I'm gonna, you know, develop my acting skills more.
Right.
And you study with her, and then you realize then how much did that change in retrospect of you knowing yourself as an actor and then applying that to doing 6 years of improv with a visual thing? Did any of that cross over, you know?
Not consciously,
Yeah.
no. But as I said earlier, the ability to be sensitive to what the audience is experiencing, trying to put myself in their shoes, as well as the technical and creative aspects that had to be fluid so that the audience could have an enhanced, more interesting experience of augmented reality as expressed on the screens with a live band, also on the, as you know, part of the imagery as well, both in real time, in actuality, and on the monitors. So but I'm not sure that any of that was conscious. It was just, I wanted for this unique experience to happen. That every setup, every performance was something where I hoped that we could do something magical. And I have to say, I was very happy that there were many magic moments that happened, that people definitely got it and they were blown away by it. So that was very fulfilling, for me.
Yeah. Well, this has been really fulfilling for me. I really appreciate your time and energy. What a fun time. And really, it could be like 5-6 months down the line, and we can delve deeper into all these further questions I have. And
Great. I
yeah.
love that.
And, even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, man. It's a pleasure for me as well. Thank you. I've
Yeah.
never had more interesting questions asked in my life. So thanks, man.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.